you so much for coming out today to see Terry Gaspard. Let me tell you a little bit about Terry Gaspard. Terry Gaspard is a licensed clinical social worker with over 30 years of clinical experience specializing in divorce, children, women's issues, and families. She is also the former director of Bristol Community College's Women's Center, an instructor at BCC, and a regular contributor to the Huffington Post and several other websites. Her book, Daughters of Divorce, was published January 19, 2016 by Sourcebooks and looks at the emotional impact of parental divorce on women and provides concrete ways they can improve them. Please join me in welcoming Terry Gaspard.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate you coming out on this very cold day. I'm also glad that we didn't have a big storm today like we have had recently. I see many of you are familiar faces from being either students in my class on campus, because I've been teaching here for about 25 years. Happy to say I love BCC. Or perhaps people that know me from being on campus, even though I haven't been the director of the Women's Center for quite some time. I like to stay active. There are so many wonderful activities here at Bristol Community College. And at the conclusion of my talk today, after I present and take questions, and I hope you have lots of questions, I will talk to you about some of the services that we have at Bristol Community College, because it's a very active place. I have to start by telling you that my first 3 years of college was at Santa Monica College in California, which is a community college, I'm proud to say. And I graduated from there and went to UCLA. And then I also got a degree at the College of Santa Fe in psychology, and then moved to the wonderful state of Rhode Island, not too far from here, where I got my master's degree in clinical social work and decided to specialize in women's issues, children, and families. So here I am doing a presentation on women and self-esteem. And what I want to tell you about this topic is you may be a little surprised about some of the things that I'm going to tell you. Because when I talk to my students in my psychology class about women and self-esteem, they often are perplexed about why women have lower self-esteem than men, and what are some of the issues that women face. And I'm going to tell you what they are. I'm going to talk about some of the cultural influences, how we're socialized a little bit differently than men. I'm also going to describe some of the characteristics of low self-esteem. You might recognize yourself, whether you're a guy or a gal, either one, or you might think about your brother, your sister, your mother, your child. So the characteristics of low self-esteem could really apply to anyone. But I particularly focus on women in this presentation because women do overall, through the lifespan, from an early age, starting primarily in early adolescence, have lower self-esteem than men do. So there is really a need to talk about women and what their specific issues are and how they can be resolved. One of my main focuses in my clinical practice, because I am a licensed clinical social worker, but also in my writing, and I am very passionate about my writing. People that know me well know that I can write until the late hours of the night or early in the morning, is to come up with tools and strategies to help people overcome issues. So it's not enough to just talk about low self-esteem. I'm going to be describing ways that women can improve their feelings of low self-worth. Okay, so hold any questions that you have, because I promise that there will be time for questions. And I will be talking a little bit about my book. And one of the reasons I decided to bring my book into the conversation today is all of my research was conducted here at Bristol Community College. I was very fortunate in the 1990s, mid-1990s, while I was in graduate school, to have the wonderful support of the administration here, of other faculty members, the library, which is one of my favorite places to conduct my research. And all of my studies, and I have actually published 3 of them, were conducted here. So that's what makes this presentation very exciting for me. And I hope that the stories that I'm going to be telling you, I'm only going to mention a few women. All the names that I use, by the way, in my presentations and my book are disguised. And what I use a lot is called composites. I don't know if you've heard of that, where you combine different stories. But the quotes that I'll use and the quotes in my book are original quotes. Okay? So hold your questions, and then after the Q&A period, we will be having a book signing, I think right outside the door here. And Melissa, a friend of mine, did come to take photographs with your permission. If you do want to be photographed during the Q&A period, just please sign a release with her so we have your permission to do so. So we're going to be talking about what is self-esteem and how it relates to your life and your choices in partners. What are some cultural influences that impact women's self-esteem, characteristics of low self-esteem, and some of my own research findings. I have a module I put together which is 10 steps to gaining self-esteem. I'm going to talk about the story of Teresa, which is a woman that I've worked with and I've helped her to improve her self-esteem, not her real name. 6 ways to let go of self-defeating and toxic relationships, because my research has showed me, and also the research of many other experts, that when you have low self-esteem, you tend to stay with toxic or dysfunctional relationships too long, pick partners that are wrong for you, etc. And then we'll have the wrap-up, as I said, questions and answers, and the book signing for those of you that you would like to purchase a book. No obligation. The books will be available at the bookstore if you don't want to make a choice today or you're not sure about that. They're also available through Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. So since I was already introduced, I'm going to skip over my background. I wasn't sure anyone would do that. So what is low self-esteem and how does it impact women? Low self-esteem is really your belief system, a blend of how you see yourself and how others see you. So how do you evaluate yourself? Do you evaluate yourself in positive or negative ways, or somewhere in the middle? I have to say that in my own life and all the women I've worked with, self-esteem isn't really always static. It's changing, it's somewhat fluid. There are periods in our life that it does maybe go a little down or a little up, but for women in general, our self-esteem tends to decline as we age because we have so many pressures and different forces affecting our self-esteem. Our self-esteem affects our perception of what we can do and how we get along with others, and it also greatly affects our coping skills, our ability to have a sense that we can handle the stresses that come up and that we can do a good job to resolve them. And so it greatly affects relationships. And when it comes to relationships, and of course, you know that I'm interested in breakup and divorce, one of the things that I've found with my research is women that have experienced all kinds of losses, not only divorce, but also a death in the family, particularly if there's been more than one death of a close family member, that can also affect your self-esteem. But divorce and the ending of a relationship, especially if it's been a long-term relationship, overall in the research has been shown to slightly impair your self-esteem. Adolescence is a crucial time for self-esteem for girls because they tend to define themselves by relationships and be, during that period of what Erik Erikson calls identity versus identity confusion. They're trying to figure out who they are. Often girls, starting out about age 11 or 12, will go inside of themselves, and they're trying to figure out where they stand in relationship to peers, family members. And in our culture, we're so critical of girls. We're so judgmental about their appearance and how they present themselves. They often don't have as much confidence in school as boys do. And now with cyberbullying and all the stress that comes along with anonymous postings on Facebook, Instagram, so on, girls are really struggling a lot with self-esteem issues. Also, past relationships. How you feel about yourself with family members, intimate partners, can also cast a shadow on your present self-esteem. You may think you're not worthy or capable of having a healthy relationship. How do you feel about school and work-related activities? One of the ways that we all judge our self-esteem is how we feel in terms of being evaluated by other people. Do we get good grades? Are we confident about how we, achieve academically and our work performance? And those are all things that are very relevant for men and women. So in terms of self-esteem, one of the important issues is how well do we bounce back from adversity? Or how resilient are we? And this is a very popular topic in psychology. And being able to be resilient has been shown to be a factor that contributes to our overall well-being throughout our lifespan. So for women, one of the things that we tend to do as a coping skill is we tend to look to friends and close family members for support. And that has been shown to be very valuable. So if we have a lot of support from family members, friends, teachers, we will do a little bit better. So reaching out to other people is a very, very wonderful skill to have. Also, a topic that's important to our self-esteem is learning to love ourselves. It is the basic part of self-esteem that can be cultivated and grown. And positive experiences in college and work, as I said, and cultivating positive relationships, but also shedding negative ones. Shedding relationships that don't contribute to our self-esteem or make us feel good about ourselves. So what are some of the cultural influences on self-esteem? Well, there are some differences culturally to how we view men and women. And this has been studied by many psychologists, including Carol Gilligan, who started out at Harvard University and is now at NYU. And what she found in her research, and I've also noted in mine, is that women tend to be socialized to be more caretakers of other people, feel more responsible for others' emotional well-being, and we tend to define ourselves through relationships. Whereas men from an early age are a little more independent and can shrug things off a little bit more. There's a book called The Curse of the Good Girl, and that book defines the fact that girls tend to be more people pleasers and don't develop intrinsic self-worth at times because they're too focused on being selfless or caring too much about other people. And then during adolescence, we learn to defer to others' needs and put our needs on the back burner. Another key factor is that women starting actually as girls tend to be judged more by their appearance than men do. And this ideal we have of being, beautiful and being perfect, being thin, perpetuated by the media and Victoria's Secret and all that, tends to give us the feeling that we're not good enough, we're not thin enough. And also, girls are socialized to be in a good mood and to try to put a smile on their face more than boys are, and to always be pleasant and accommodate others. So these are some of the cultural influences that contribute to a girl's or a woman's lower self-esteem as compared to boys. So what are some of the characteristics of low self-esteem? When I go through them, keep in mind that they do differ from situation to situation. So you might be able to relate to a couple of them, but not all of them. And their self-esteem does vary. It's, as I said, it's not always staying the same. The first characteristic of low self-esteem is you are too agreeable. You tend to go along with other people, and even if you don't agree with what they say, you might not want to make waves and be a little bit too passive. The second would be you avoid confrontations. And this can lead to problems in all kinds of relationships, stemming from intimate relationships, family relationships, or even with teachers in school if you don't want to talk about something that's important to you. It's better to speak up in appropriate ways and say what you think and what you feel. Next, you believe other people have it better than you do. So you tend to compare yourself to other people when you have low self-esteem and judge yourself a little more harshly. Then you feel ashamed of your family or your upbringing. You might wish that you were raised in a different family, and especially for kids growing up in adoptive families or during families where there's been a lot of mental health issues, divorce, or other issues, you might think that your family isn't as good as other people's families. Keep in mind, self-esteem is how you evaluate yourself compared to other people. Next, you often feel you should be doing something else, or you might make disparaging or negative comments about yourself. And I've noted this with a lot of women who say, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science. I particularly struggled with math when I was young, and I can relate to people that feel that they have to work really hard to get through certain subjects in school. You are insecure about any contributions you make or your appearance. And these factors can really limit your potential. If you don't feel you have a lot to add to a discussion in a classroom or a group project, for instance, you might tend to sit back in the rear of the classroom, not speak up, and this could hamper your potential in the class because you might have a really important question to ask and you might not feel confident enough to put the question out there. You have been too clingy or needy at times. Conversely, you may not ask enough of your partner, friends, or family. So this could go either way. You either tend to cling on too much to people, or you don't feel comfortable asking for what you need. And then you might feel guilty or ashamed of being angry. Perhaps you try to contain your anger, and bottling up anger can lead to resentment, and that obviously can cause people to be unhappy in relationships or can cause breakups. Next, you never feel like you deserve to be number one in someone's life, and this may cause you to pick partners who aren't a good match for you, or you might stay in relationships too long once you've identified that the relationship is not a healthy one for you. Okay, so I already talked about my research at Bristol Community College. I'm just going to quickly go over a few of my findings. My first two studies were large studies, and I looked at men and women, the average age of the students that I surveyed, and I used descriptive research, survey research for my first two studies without interviews. I found that when I studied men and women, that women who were raised in disruptive, divorced homes had slightly lower self-esteem than males, and they had some trust issues in relationships. So I said, that's interesting, and I was able to publish those two studies with the help of one of my professors at Rhode Island College that I did the research with. Then I kind of stepped back for a long time, and then I realized through the years with my clinical practice and my own experience that I wanted to look more in depth at some women who were raised in divorced homes to see why they had those issues. And what I found in some of the research that I read were some really surprising statistics. And this may kind of shock you too to find out that 40% of Americans, not just women, but 40% of Americans in 2015 between the ages of 18 and 40 are actually children of divorce. So that's a startling statistic. And adult children of divorce, and I happen to be one of those, I was raised in a divorced family myself, are more than twice as likely to get a divorce themselves. Adult children of divorce are more than twice as likely to see their marriages end. So that gives me a lot of motivation to do research and help people come up with good coping skills and ways to break the legacy of divorce. 2/3 of all divorces in the United States are initiated by women. And you can ask questions about that. I'll give you a few points on that. A lot of the current studies tend to say that women are a lot more dissatisfied in relationships because of what they point to as an inequality in the amount of jobs or chores or activities they have to do to kind of keep the relationship going and to keep their partners happy. So most of the divorces in the United States, 2/3, are initiated by women. So what did I find in my large sample of 327 daughters of divorce? What were some of my findings? One of my major findings was that many of the women did really well. In fact, most of the women that I interviewed came out as what I describe as competent and caring. They tend to be really high achievers and do quite well. And some of them that had good relationships with both of their parents, really most of them, actually had pretty healthy relationships and a good kind of view of what they wanted in their relationships to be different than what their parents were. So that could be the silver lining that I'll talk about in a minute. But some tended to repeat the past, and some tended to pass on the legacy of divorce to their children and stay with partners that were wrong for them. And others tended to feel that their relationships were doomed to fail like their parents were, so they didn't have a positive view of themselves, having relationships that would be long-lasting. And many were more likely to experience low self-esteem, which impacts your success in relationships. And mistrust for the daughters of divorce who didn't have healthy relationships was once again a major theme that I found in my third study. Mistrust or lacking your own instinct or good judgment about other people, and also not trusting your partners, feeling like they didn't have your best interests at heart. Many of the women I interviewed entered relationships that were wrong for them, as I said. They tended to stay too long. But then I also noticed this silver lining. There was a core group of women who I highlight in my book who really did go into relationships with their eyes wide open. They waited to get involved. They didn't tend to become committed to their partners at an early age. They went to school. They worked on their own goals. Often they didn't get rush or plunge into relationships. They had higher self-esteem. They had better feelings of trust, and they were able to be vulnerable or talk about themselves in a very authentic way. These women created strong partnerships based on trust and intimacy, and they were able to take a chance on love. And what I found with my research, one of my overall findings, is that the key to success in terms of having stronger long-term relationships, if you were raised in a divorced home, is to have more self-awareness. And in the book, I give ways to do that, and I give a survey that I gave the women, and learning new skills that can help you have higher self-esteem, work through your trust issues, and repair any wounds that you have from the past. So the book is full of all kinds of strategies and ways to do that. One of the things that I've noted in my research, to move ahead to talk about self-esteem, that has also been noted by the famous researcher and author Brené Brown, is that authenticity requires a certain measure of vulnerability, transparency, and integrity. And that's a quote by Janet Louise Stevenson. And that is that women who aren't people pleasers and sometimes stand up for what they believe, even when it's unpopular, tend to be more authentic and have higher self-esteem. They're open-minded, they're receptive to what other people have to say. They tend to forge their own paths and maybe go into a career that other people would question or find is a little bit unique or different. And they're very generous with themselves and others. And what I mean by that is they tend to show compassion to themselves. They're not hard on themselves, but they're also generous with others with their time and their energy. So what are 10 steps to gaining self-esteem? Examine your childhood experience for any negative or self-defeating messages that are derived from it. Because most of us grew up in families where we didn't have a lot of unconditional positive regard. Recognize that the way you feel about yourself impacts your relationships and how you relate to other people. Make choices that impact you in a positive way, including following what your passion or interest is, and studying it and improving your skills so you get better at it. Not seeing yourself as a victim, but taking charge of your life and setting some goals that are meaningful for you. And I'm going to talk about how you can do that in a few minutes. One thing that I've done for many years now that I highly recommend for all my clients, but particularly women, is making an intention or setting a small goal that you think you can achieve that particular day. This can boost your confidence. And place that goal within your vision. You can post it on a little sticky note or put it in your notebook. These intentions can be small, but they can have a huge positive impact on your self-esteem. And then follow through on them. Make sure that you're checking it and kind of evaluating yourself. So positive intentions can last for a certain amount of time, whether you want to improve how you're doing in a class, whether you want to improve your personal relationships, your attendance in school, your work performance, but you have to tweak them and not keep them the same. So the research tends to show about every 21 days, you want to look at your intentions, like improve my grade in my psychology class, for instance, and then revise it. Next, you want to keep track of any automatic negative thoughts that you have that tend to pop into your brain that might sort of sabotage your success. For instance, you might be telling yourself, as I used to, I'm not a good math student. I'm not going to get a good grade in this class. Or I'm never going to understand all these concepts in sociology. If you tend to buy into those negative self-talk statements, it's only going to bring you down. So what you can do is you can replace them with positive affirmations, such as, I'm learning to accept and love myself every day. Maybe I'm not the best math student, but I'm pretty good at understanding people. Or I can learn how to make something new, or make new friends, or get along better with my classmates and my teachers. Change persistent negative thoughts to positive statements or self-talk. We all tend to talk to ourselves every day, and a lot of people joke and tease about that. But think about it, how we tell ourselves things every day, but we don't tend to write them down. Because I'm a writer, of course, I emphasize this a lot in my sessions with my clients and my students, but I think it's important to write some of your thoughts down. See what they are, and keep a daily success journal so that every day you're keeping track of your negative thoughts and trying to tweak or change them, but also writing down 3 things that you feel good about that you did every day. Like, I arrived at class on time, or I finished my math homework, or I went for a 30-minute power walk between classes, whatever it is. And be sure to use something which I call a vision board, if that's helpful. If you're a visual person, many of you are, you would like to maybe perhaps have a board that you construct where you put little posts of things, of quotes. I love quotes myself. I tend to post a lot on Facebook and Twitter. Messages that are inspiring to you, intentions, affirmations, photographs that would help to inspire you, and review that vision board daily. It can be where you want to see yourself, hopefully in 5 or 10 years. You want a better job. You want to get that 4-year degree or even a master's degree. All these things are within your reach, but setting goals is the only way you're going to achieve them. And this is a really important step to gaining self-esteem, which a lot of people don't talk about, and that is cultivating partnerships with people that help you grow, whether they be other students. Bristol Community College has a lot of great activities where you can go and meet people, join clubs, student activities, get to know other individuals in your classes and also in your work life. and shed unhealthy or toxic relationships that are not serving you well. And focus on those relationships that are helpful. Last, reframe your weaknesses. We all have unique potentials, and we can think about those, and deepen our motivation by learning a new skill and studying more. A lot of times I think we underestimate how important it is to spend time either at the library, which is one of my favorite spots, as I said, because I can weed out distractions, put my phone on silent, and just stay focused. Bristol Community College is a great place to use the library because they have that nice cyber cafe. You can sneak over there and get a little cup of coffee or something, go back, stay focused, and set a goal for yourself. I'm going to study for an hour or 45 minutes, then I'm going to take a 10 or 15 minute break, and then I'm going to go back. Meet a friend there so that you have a study partner. I've always found that beneficial. So I'm going to tell a quick story of Teresa. I have about 5 more minutes, and then I'll take questions. That's not her real name. But Teresa is a college student that I've worked with through the years, and she's a mom. She's a single parent in her mid-20s with a young child. And she had a tendency to stay in toxic or dysfunctional relationships too long that tended to sabotage her personal goals of completing college. So she would drop out of school for a while, and then she would end up back because she knew she was smart, she was very capable, but her relationships were her Achilles heel. They tended to drag her down. And she believed that she wasn't really worthy of getting that college degree because no one else in her family had one. So it was hard for her to envision herself with higher self-esteem. The key to Teresa improving her self-esteem was trusting herself and being more assertive. And in my book and many books on assertiveness, there are lots of different ways you can do that. But one way is to trust your own judgment, focus on your strengths, and is another way. I've already mentioned being compassionate toward yourself and cultivating healthier relationships. So she is not staying in dysfunctional relationships anymore. She's made some new friends. She has the capability to finish school. She's now in a 4-year degree program and doing quite well. And here are 6 ways to let go of self-defeating and toxic relationships, since I've talked about them so much. Researchers have developed a link between low self-esteem and staying in toxic or negative relationships. If you have higher self-esteem, you're going to feel better about your relationships. Women with higher self-esteem tend to pick partners at a similar level and feel more satisfied. So if you feel better about yourself, you're going to pick partners that are at that level who help boost your self-esteem. Our longing for connection, as I said earlier, our tendency as women to define ourselves through relationships at times can cause us to settle for less than we deserve in a partner. And toxic relationships can destroy our self-esteem, consume a lot of our energy that we could be using for studying, work, and other activities, and cause us a lot of stress. So what can you do? You can seek a partner that you can be yourself with, that you feel comfortable being authentic with, and set an expectation of mutual respect. Don't compromise your values. Try to find relationships with people that share your mindset, your values, and your beliefs. Be more assertive. And definitely plan to extend trust to someone who is trustworthy. And this isn't just true for daughters of divorce. A lot of us have trust issues based on experiences where we have been let down by other people. But if you see consistency between someone's actions and what they say and do, so their consistency between what they say and their behavior, you have all the reasons to believe and trust them. Select a partner who plans a future with you, whether it be a friendship or a committed relationship, someone who includes you in their life and wants to do things with you. So just to wrap up my talk today and take some questions, there are many services on campus in G Building. I'm sure many of you have been over there where the cafeteria is. Upstairs in G Building is where we have the counseling services and a lot of advisors that can help you with personal counseling, advisement, which is really beneficial. And it's a great hub to stop by, and there's health services up there, which is especially important if you have a health issue. So get involved in BCC activities. Downstairs is a student activity center, the fitness center, which you can use, which can make you feel good about yourself physically. Connect with others who have similar interests. If you feel like stopping by, there's going to be a book signing booth, and I can sign books if you're interested in buying one or talking to me about my book. And thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to open it up for questions and see if anyone has any questions, either about self-esteem or my book today. If you want to be photographed, as I said, you can sign a release over there. Does anyone have any questions about my research or any of the issues that I described today? Yes?
My daughter, she's 5, and her biological father has never been in her life, and my husband, who's been her stepfather since she was 2. I stopped to worry about her recently because she starts to say like she's a bad child, and she's not. She's a great athlete, a great student, a really good person. She's funny, and she's really down on herself lately. So I don't know if that connection with her biological father is something that's bothering her, but she doesn't talk to me about. Is there something I can do or talk to her to get her to maybe change these feelings she's having?
That's a really great question. As I said, girls tend to define themselves by relationships and how they think other people feel about them. A lot of girls tend to have a wound in that relationship with their dad if there's been a lot of separation. So what I would recommend you do is, if it's comfortable and you're in a safe place, ask her if she has any feelings about that, if she has any questions about that, and let her know you're always open to talking to her about that. There are actually some great children's books on that topic that I can recommend to you. If you want to email me, I can give you my email address. Keep in mind that many dads are isolated from their daughters after a separation or a divorce, and it's not necessarily because they want to be. It can be circumstances. It can be that they have a poor relationship with their ex. So I think what you want to help her to see is that it's nothing that she did, to try, maybe through your discussions with her, try to think of ways to help boost her self-esteem by pointing out the things that she's doing well. But letting her know that you're aware that she may have some concerns and some questions about that, and reading some books with her is really beneficial. Also, schools often have support groups for kids now having to do with those topics. The first place to go with children, I think, is to talk to a school counselor. And sometimes they'll have a lunch bunch program or a counseling drop-in kind of thing set up. But early adolescence is definitely a pivotal time for girls where their self-esteem can be impacted. So the first thing is being more aware of it, which you are, because a lot of parents aren't aware of it. And it sounds like she may have had some issues from when she was young that are starting to surface a little bit. So letting her know that you're open and very eager to talk to her about it. And also realizing that sometimes kids don't want to talk to us when we're available to talk to them. Just things pop out when you're driving in the car when you least expect them. Great, thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
It's when you have low self-esteem and you think you're over it, you're not really over it because something pops up.
Mm-hmm.
It's a constant
Circumstantial, situational.
You have to work at
Right.
it almost every day.
Yes, it is an ongoing effort, yes.
I've had low self-esteem all my life.
Mm-hmm.
I am comfortable in my skin now, but something happens or something was said and you go right back to
Yeah, you revert
place.
back to the past. That's a really good point.
So
Yeah.
how do you just keep on doing what you do? Just make a journal and keep positive?
It is an ongoing effort for most of us that have dealt with low self-esteem because it tends to date back to our childhood. So I think, even though I say we can define ourselves differently than the way we were raised, we can move beyond this. I think in addition to the journaling and the reading, I find reading very, very empowering. Having a support system set up is really key. Here at Bristol Community College, there is a lot of good support. I'd like to see more opportunities for women to get together and talk to other women about these issues, because I know myself, and I'm a blogger and I get a lot from blogging, I still like face-to-face interactions with other women. And I know when I went through my divorce, and I've gone through periods in my life where I felt really down on myself and reverted back to old negative ways of thinking, like I'm never going to get better, things are not going to improve. The best way for me to get through that was through talking to other women. And sometimes close friends and or family members are not the best people to talk to. Does that sound weird?
No.
You know, I mean, they have their own guilt or they have their own issues that might prevent them from being supportive. And I used to feel bad about that. And then I realized that I'm not unusual. With all the women that I interviewed, many of them said the same thing, that they couldn't always go to their moms during times of stress.
Sometimes the mom is the problem.
Yeah, my mom's deceased, but I didn't always get along with her. In fact, in some ways, you know, that caused me problems because I didn't feel I could be vulnerable with her and tell her until much later. And I was able to heal the wounds later on with her, but as a young woman, or forget about being a young woman, as a teenager or a young adult, I didn't feel like I could confide in her, so I tended to hold all those feelings in. And women we do tend to internalize and blame ourselves when things don't go well in relationships or in school. And so it's all tied into self-esteem. So you just have to keep reminding yourself, and don't be afraid to reach out to other people, because there are a lot of good people here at BCC who are more than glad to be there for you. The instructors at this school take so much interest in their students, the counseling center, hopefully more services available through the Women's Committee to see that you're not alone. And then, you know, just keep those daily practices that I talked about, keeping the journal. If you don't like to write, doing the vision board, affirmations can really be beneficial as well. Thank you. Yes?
Well, I want to talk about on the other side of the spectrum, you know, we're talking about low self-esteem.
Yes.
What about the other side, high self-esteem?
Uh-huh.
Are there any social consequences to women who seem to have high self-esteem?
Social consequences. Well, I think that our society tends to judge women harshly, and that we don't always approve of women that have high self-esteem. So I think you have to realize that you're not always going to be liked and accepted. So like I said earlier, if you have low self-esteem, you tend to, you know, not value yourself. But if you have higher self-esteem, you may feel, at times you have to speak up, even if your opinion is not popular. And you also would need some support for that. If your family or your coworkers or other people that you're in connection with don't accept you and embrace you because you have higher self-esteem, that's a problem as well, that you may need some support for that. Women that have higher self-esteem don't suffer or struggle as much because they don't blame themselves for their problems, but that doesn't mean you're socially acceptable. So I don't know if I answered that, but thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
I see the relationship between staff and students to really make a difference here, with families becoming more dysfunctional.
Uh-huh.
In
Good point.
your personal experience as a staff member, what kinds of experiences can you share?
You mean in terms of like how large the classes are? And
Just making a difference with maybe a particular student or students, giving them that encouragement for them to continue on their path
well,
in education.
I think making time for students is really important, and being connected, and you have to do that. You have to make time. I'm a part-time faculty member, so I'm not on campus every day. I try to make myself available when students are available, because I know that people are rushing to classes, so they're not necessarily obviously going to be able to meet with you before class, or in my case after class, because my classes tend to end late. Connecting through emails, through face-to-face meetings is really best. Making referrals to students when you feel that's, you know, important for them to connect with other people on campus. Being understanding about some of the stresses that they're under and showing empathy towards them, that, you know, you get the fact that, you know, coming to class is hard at times, and they might have childcare issues, other issues that are, you know, affecting them. It's a big commitment being a faculty or staff member. It definitely is.
Your specialty, I would think, you know, more students might consider going to you and having discussions.
Well, I do get a lot of questions, and I do get a lot of comments from students in my psychology classes before, after, and during, and even when I'm not teaching, about where they go for help. And there are a lot of services on campus, but not as many as there were in years past when I was the director of the Women's Center, so then I often have to refer them out. And sometimes they're hesitant to go outside of campus for services because they don't know people. They don't want to, you know, everybody has their own sense of shame or judgment about what are other people going to think of me. So
You have that trust issue.
the trust issue is big for a lot of women. So, you know, I'd like to say start on campus. I know we have some very qualified counselors at the counseling center. And hopefully we'll have more services as time goes by. I know there's a women's center on Stanley Street that's very well thought of, that where women can go for services. But just being able to listen and validate your students for their experience, and not just teaching to the test, but having a lot of, you know, discussions in whatever realm you teach in, which helps students feel connected with other students. I try to make a lot of time for questions, answers, discussions in my class, so students have some sense of that human, you know, interaction piece, and not just being one of many people in the class, because it's going to keep you motivated. It's going to make you want to come back and take more classes. You know, but self-esteem, as I said earlier, does impact how you feel about yourself in all realms. Your relationships, including relationships with your instructors and other students. So as I said, if you're sitting in the back of the class and you're not speaking up and you're not asking questions and you're not interacting with others, you're going to feel more isolated and have a tendency to not want to come back or not finish or complete classes or get a degree. And success breeds success. So if you get even one good grade, which that's relative to each person, but if you get, you know, a grade that you can feel proud of and you feel you have a sense of accomplishment, that's going to make you want to keep going and going and going. And BCC is really good at that overall. We're really good at helping students get a jump start. I know in my case, as I said, I started at a community college, and I like to tell my students that, you know, that because of my family and the divorce and the lack of financial means, that was a really great opportunity for me to start at a community college, then go to a four-year college, and then go on and get my master's degree. And honestly, I'm the only one in my family of my siblings that completed a bachelor's degree, let alone a master's degree. So if I can do it, I know you can do it. It is possible. But I'd like to see more groups on campus for women. I used to run single parents groups here years ago and do a lot of presentations on those kinds of topics. And as I said, 40% of all adults were raised in single family homes or children of divorce, and there is a legacy of divorce, so it tends to get passed on. So a lot of the students here are single parents raising kids, which is a tremendous effort, but also can be overcome. Yes, Melissa.
So is this internationally seeing a similar pattern, or is it more so in the U.S.?
I focus on the United States with my statistics, but that's a really good question. I'm not sure internationally. I know that's in the United States. The divorce rate was going down for a while. It was high in the 70s and 80s, and then in the 90s, in the early part of the 21st century, had gone down to about 40%, and now it's back up close to 50% again. 50% of first-time marriages end in divorce. And that's pretty high. And I think a lot of it is people tend to jump into getting married too quickly. We don't always know ourselves very well. Maybe we're too young. In my book, I recommend that people wait till they're close to 30. They have a sense of accomplishment. they know themselves a little better, and know someone that you're dating for at least a minimum of 2 years before you make a permanent commitment. Because relationships can be tricky, and you want to give it time. Take it slow. Yes, in the back.
So, I'm going to try and answer this question without putting too much information, but I think there's a really fine line between like when you have self-esteem, like almost making someone else it either motivates them and like they want to go on the ride with you, or it almost makes them feel bad about themselves. Like, I've been with my daughter's father for a long time.
Uh-huh.
He's recently been going through a lot, and it's like when I first met him, I wasn't doing well in my life, and now that I have my daughter, I
Yep.
am. And it's almost like I almost feel bad going to school and like getting my car on the road and doing all that because I feel like it makes him feel bad. But it's like I feel like there's a really fine line. Like some people see it as you're better than, you're bragging, and other people see it as like motivation when they see someone else doing good. So like it's a really fine line. Like how do you use your self-esteem almost to like, I'm very big on like motivating other people and like rubbing it off on someone else who's trying to also like get a jump start and move on and stuff. Like how do you, I don't know how to do that without almost, I mean, he's my daughter's father. I guess some people's impression, like when you're arguing, it's like, oh, you think you're better than this and that, but it's like, I really want to use that to like motivate someone else. Like because I remember when I wasn't doing good in life, like when I saw other people doing good, I didn't feel like they were better than, I felt like that was motivation. Like I wanted the car, I wanted to go to school. Like how do you not, like I don't know, how do you rub that off on someone else without making it seem like, oh, well, I'm better than you, you know?
Wow, that's an incredible question, and you're very compassionate, wanting to help other people so greatly. So first of all, your self-awareness is very high, and as I said earlier, that's really key. You know what you want, you've got some goals, you're motivated, but you're also caring about the other people around you that don't appear as motivated as you are, and you want to know how you can give them a jump start. Well, this may not be too popular, but I'm going to say ultimately all we can ever truly do is change ourselves. So what you're doing is the right thing by working on yourself. That doesn't mean you can't encourage other people to come along, but they have to make that step themselves. Some people, particularly kids, and I've seen this with my own kids, will be motivated by watching us because we're models for them. That's all based on the theory of observational learning through the famous psychology Albert Bandura. So other people in your life will observe you, and they will see what you're doing, and they will, you know, kind of make a little mental note and think, well, maybe I can do some of those things, particularly if they're younger. If other people may feel envious or threatened by some of the successes that we have in our lives, and I've gotten some of that with publishing my book, believe it or not. Oh boy, you got your book published, you know, no congratulations or whatever. And these are people that I thought were maybe in, you know, in my group of friends. Okay, maybe they can't go along with us on our journey, if you're following me. But that's something they have to deal with. So that's when I talked earlier about cultivating supportive relationships. You know, hopefully most of your relationships are going to last and endure throughout your lifetime. I have found that not all do. You know, not everybody is going to walk that same path or journey with us. But you have very admirable goals. So, but just, you got to keep your focus on yourself, because some of us as women tend to get sidetracked, you know, with relationships. What's that?
It's like motherly, like you want to take care of.
Caretakers, right? We're socialized to be caretakers, you know? And some people think that that's changed a lot. And ultimately, cultural influences take a long time to change. Even though most women work full-time, go to school, we're juggling a lot, we still tend to be the more responsible ones in terms of our relationships and taking care of other people. And I see that as a very admirable quality. You know, it's a double-edged sword. You're very compassionate, caring, but on the other hand, you've got to stick with what you know is the right thing for you, because if anyone puts off whatever their goals are for long enough because they want other people to join them, or they don't feel that maybe they're going to be well received by their family or friends, then that's just treading water. It's not going to get you where you want to go. So stay on your path, be compassionate, continue with that compassion that you have, and hopefully some others will follow you. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it's just hard, especially when, like you were saying, the divorce thing, like this person, it's not like it's like a friend that if they fall off, that's okay. It's like he is going to influence my daughter for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like, do I let him fall off, or do I mean, he's not doing bad. It's just like I would like to see him come along with me to like start working on getting a house and whatever.
Right.
I had to go on my own but it's hard because, like I said, he's going to influence my daughter for the rest of his life. I want him to come with me on this, whether we're together or not, to make sure that she sees that, like you said, a role model.
You want the best for her, and you're doing the right thing by working on accomplishing your goals. She's looking at you just as much as, more so right now than anyone. You're setting a tone for her. By going back to school as a single parent, you're an incredible role model for your child, whether it be a daughter or a son. I tell all my students that because it's very, very hard to have a child, one or more children, and be a student. But they're looking at you and they're noticing. In fact, I recommend you study side by side with your kids. And they see you studying and they're doing their homework. That is the most impactful memory that they're going to have. I did have that with my mom. She was a lifelong student and she loved school. And I've tried to do that with my own kids. And that can be a very meaningful experience for her. You can't do anything about the other people, including other family members. So just, I would just keep doing what you're doing and be that good role model for her. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes?
What piece of advice would you give to someone trying to make themselves better? Like they know they have low self-esteem. They know they're in a toxic relationship and family has helped influence or attempt to help influence, but there just doesn't seem to be that step.
They're kind of stuck?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a therapist, so I'm going to preface what I say with this. You know where I'm going on this one, probably. I personally think that individual counseling is a really good way to go, and/or support groups. If you can get both, that's the best. Because many of us, as I said earlier, don't have close friends or family members that can be objective and really listen and support us. Often we do get stuck in those relationships that are self-defeating because of the way we were raised or our self-image. And you need someone to help you set some goals to work through that. It's very hard to leave a pattern that we're comfortable with. Freud talked about repetition compulsion, which is, whether you agree with his theory or not, that's one part of it that always makes a lot of sense to me, because in all my interviews, I did notice that. We tend to repeat the past, patterns that we observed or were ingrained in our childhood. So, we don't just get it from our parents. Divorce and breakup and dysfunctional relationships are everywhere. So it's part of our culture. So, a lot of women, even in the 21st century, and I'm not speaking of anyone personally here, but I can speak for myself and other women, are afraid to be alone, for instance. We don't realize that we can take care of ourselves. We don't need another person to define who we are. But until you've been alone for a while and felt successful, then maybe you're a little hesitant to be alone. So, be more comfortable with making decisions based from a period of period where you have been able to be a little more self-sufficient, you have positive relationships, and getting support from a therapist can be beneficial. And if you don't have that, cultivate those really good friendships with people that boost you up and don't bring you down. And I'm sure those friendships are out there for you. I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you very much. And I appreciate you coming today. If you have any questions or you would like my email, please let me know.